Welcome to AICamp on Air. Today we're going to be, or I'm not going to be presenting, but Gloria is going to be presenting a step-by-step guide on how to get started in data science competitions. So could I have the next slide, please? Perfect, thanks. So we're AICamp, if you're not aware. We learn and practice AI from anywhere, usually in the form of webinars at the moment, live workshops and courses. We host them in 15 different countries, in over 50 cities around the world, and we currently have a network of over 100,000 developers. So here are the locations that we currently have chapters in. We're growing every day, and if you want to find more about our local chapters, then please visit the website on the screen now, and we'll share all of the links in a follow-up. And we'd like to talk about some of the events that are coming up in the very near future. So we have an event happening this Friday. It's an event that will happen in both the Europe, Africa, Middle East, and APAC region in the afternoon. And then we will have another block in the North American region that lasts all day. So a bit about the summit. It's a one-day virtual event. We aim to bring developers, engineers from all over the world together to share machine learning and engineering solutions in production. And we also aim to talk about the practical experiences, best practices, the tools and frameworks that are used in ML operations. So as I said, we have two blocks. The Europe and APAC region is going to be from around midday to 1 p.m., finishing up around 3 to 4 p.m. And we have a really exciting series of European-based speakers. And then we have the block 2 for North American region, and that's going to start at around 10 a.m. and end in 4 p.m. That's Pacific Coast time. So please register for this. It's going to be a really exciting day, full of talks and a really interesting experience from some of the best people in the field. Also, on this point, we have 2 more summits coming up, one on the 3rd of September, which is going to talk about automating ML solutions, and one on September the 18th, that will be about natural language processing in particular. Thanks. We also have an exciting paper club coming up. This will probably kick off in around late August to into September. The paper club aims to engage developers in the socio-political impacts of the design decisions of machine learning algorithms that we have in some of the largest social media platforms or in some of the largest engineering companies that we have at the moment. So we have a link to the GitHub repo that has some of the papers that we're going to be either getting the authors of the papers to come and present their research, or we will be having and hosting a discussion ourselves on the types of techniques that are used in those papers. They're likely to be around sessions of around an hour with a 20-minute talk, and also a 30-minute kind of breakout session to discuss the paper in question. So that'll be a really good way to keep in touch with the cutting-edge academic research in this space. Thanks, Bill. So this is exactly the AIcamp mission that we have. We are an online learning platform for developers, and we aim to learn and practice AI together. So we have online live sessions. We also learn and collaborate using AI and ML by building projects together, and we collaborate in groups. And that's why we have the Slack channel that we'll make available to all of you at the end of the session. Yeah, we also have a networking Slack channel as well, so you can join that and feel free to discuss any of the topics that are brought up today with the fellow attendees. We also have a job posting channel as well to find any kind of employment opportunities hosted by the speakers or partners or sponsoring companies that are involved with us. All right, thanks. So let's get on to the talk that we're going to host today. I'll give a bit of an introduction to the topic, but Gloria will take over afterwards. So what Gloria is going to talk about is a competition that was hosted by AIcrowd. It's called the AI4Good competition, and the specific competition was Snake Species Identification Challenge. What we're going to talk about in a pragmatic way is providing a step-by-step guide for beginners who want to get started in the fascinating universe of data science competitions. And we're going to talk about how you get involved with them, what kind of techniques Gloria used. And I've personally been involved with a large amount of data science competitions. They're a really great way to meet other people in the field who are just as passionate. So I'm fully convinced that you guys will be convinced to get involved with competitions by the end of the topic.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Christina. Then I'll take it from here. And I'll start by sharing my screen. Okay. Okay, so the title of this presentation is Can Deep Learning Charm Snakes, right? And I think that's kind of what this competition in which I took part was trying to assess. And as Christina very well explained, it was all about identifying snake species, right? And if you have already taken part or you are considering taking part in AI competitions in platforms such as Kaggle, AIcrowd, or let's say even like more general competitions about like algorithm development or problem solving in computer science, I truly think those are fantastic opportunities to learn in a gamified environment and meet people from all over the world, right? So for instance, I took part in this competition with a great guy called Zachary Muller, and we haven't met ever yet in person, right? And yet I consider him my friend through this online interaction. And I think that's something that will also happen to you, right? Then a few things about this competition on this AIcrowd platform. It was organized by the Institute of Global Health, right? And you will see a bit later why. And I think that's also one of the things that dragged my attention because I like to take part in competitions that I consider to be in this AI4Good category, that they have like a social impact. The reason why is because, so to say, being my job title, and I will tell you a bit more what I do at my work and maybe a bit my persona after the talk, because I have this tendency to only be interested in the speaker's profile when that speaker has said something that interests me. So that's why I'm keeping for the last part. But basically what I want to say is I have a no coding in my day-to-day already. So if I do it in my free time, it's because I want to do something like versatile, right? And I saw that competition as a good opportunity for that. So what was it all about, and which are the challenges, and why was it so challenging to make it to the top 5, right? And I think if you look at the competition results, you will see that between, so to say, my team score and the first team, there was even like a substantial gap, right? And why there were like so few submissions in comparison to like the over 600 participants that attempted to crack this competition, right? And to be honest, some of these challenges are not even what you will typically think when you think about like an image classification problem, right? And that's a bit what I want to tell you in here. So what was this competition all about? Well, the first thing you have to understand is that snakebite is like a real problem. It's actually considered the most deadly neglected tropical disease. And it's responsible for like a dramatic humanitarian global health crisis. It accounts for like over 100,000 human deaths a year and like 400,000 victims, right? So people that typically are working, let's say, on rice fields and get bitten on the legs or on the arms, and then they usually need to be amputated, right? And some of the deaths are, for instance, children that may get bitten on the face, or adults. And that's also one of the posters you will see if you ever go to like a refugee camp, that they are warning about snake bites, right? And the World Health Organization, the WHO, recently recognized that as a disease. Then, of course, there are antivenoms for many snakes, not all of them, but many snakes. But yet it's a challenge to get this antivenom. And why is that a challenge? Well, because to get the right antivenom, you would have to correctly identify the snake. And that's difficult from both sides, from the person that gets bitten by a snake, because they are sometimes bitten. I mean, it's not a peaceful and happy event. So in very few cases, the victim is able to properly describe the snake. In some cases, they are able to take a picture, or a family member is able to kill the snake and bring it to like the closest doctor office, right? And then sometimes the problem comes on the other side, that doctors are not herpetologists, so they don't have a background in snake biology, so they are not able to identify snakes, right? So that's why the Institute of Global Health saw in that a chance of, basically a chance of attempting to crack this problem with deep learning, right? Or with machine learning in general, let's say with AI in general, and then gave participants like the data set so that they could decide how they wanted to do it. Okay, so let's talk a bit about kind of the main concepts, right? Or how you would approach maybe a standard data science competition. And you may have your favorite, let's say, or nowadays is, I would say, pretty much a standard to approach an image classification competition with deep learning techniques. And then in that case, you will have your deep learning framework of choice being TensorFlow, being PyTorch, being any other, right? But basically you will try to frame that problem in this context. Then, or what I've seen also in most, in many data science competitions is people using fast AI, right? And I want to do a big shout out to a community I'm part of, participating in the forums, developing like great free courses for developers and like people in general that want to learn about data science, right? So I think that's, and it's not only a course, it's also a library, and many people will be, for instance, using this library, which is a wrapper on top of PyTorch, right? And that's of course an initial good approach, but that's not gonna get you definitely to the top 5 of that competition, right? Or not alone. Why is that? Well, let me show you why this problem is so challenging. Well, basically, this problem is so challenging because snake identification is incredibly complicated. So what you're seeing here, for instance, are on the left, the variation of a snake with age. So you have here a juvenile snake and an adult snake, and it's the same snake species, right? So so this snake here is the same as this snake. But they don't look at all similar, right? So you need to train a machine learning model that's able to grasp that. Then there is, of course, geographic variation. So all the snakes on the right are, again, the same snake, just in different parts of the world, right? And they have adapted to the climate and they have adapted to the vegetation, but they are yet the same snake species. Okay, why is that so challenging? Like, more reasons. Then your data set will be very biased probably, because you're gonna get most images, let's say, from US, and I mean US or Europe maybe, and though these places don't have, it's not that one could say precisely that the US is not rich in snakes, but it's clearly not like the Amazonian or India or Japan, or I mean you can clearly see the issue here also on your data set. What else? Yes, then there are, of course, the fact that some harmless snakes try to copy some very venomous snakes as a strategy. And this is also something that you will have to deal, right? That you have to identify that these two snakes are different, that these two snakes are different, and these two is different, and so on and so on, right? And actually, they are not only different, they also have very different medical implications. Yeah, so I think you're getting a grasp of why that competition was so tricky, right? Yeah, maybe I'll continue here, and if there are any questions, you just I'll save some space at the end, but you ask me also anytime in the chat. Okay, so more stuff. Well, another important point is that snakes are not Instagrammers, and let me show you what I mean by that. So that's kind of pictures that you will see on your data set, right? So you will see things like, for instance, somebody who took a snake picture from the car. So, I mean, yeah, good luck identifying that snake. Or you will see pieces of like incomplete snakes. So you don't have the head, and the head is crucial, I would say, in image classification, image detection problem. Sometimes you have, I mean, they killed the snake and they brought it to the doctor office and they took a picture, and that's the best you get, right? So yes, you have the full snake, but bottom left, it's in state that, yeah, clearly not optimal. Then sometimes you will have the hand of the person who catch that snake, right? Yeah, and then finally, you will also have some completely noisy images in your data set, because like pornography is a reality everywhere, right? So as a data scientist, you will have to think how to approach all that. Yeah, so what else? Then you will also find a very imbalanced data set. And it's the classical long tail distribution that you see some snakes being at super high, and that's not even the full data set, right? What I'm showing you here are about, like, there are many snake species, like over 3,000. In the competition, you had 783 classes that were added in the different rounds. And what you're seeing here is just like the most frequent ones, right? So you're still missing a very substantial part of this long tail. And of course, that as an organizer forces you to think which is the good metric to evaluate submissions. But a participant also forces you, how will you deal with that? Will you oversample the minority classes? Will you undersample the majority one? How will you make sure that your model doesn't end up predicting only like 4 or 10 types of snakes the whole time? And then it was interesting that in the last round of the competition, tabular information was added. So it was not only images, but you would also have where that image was coming from. Not the GPS coordinates, but at the very least the country and obviously the continent. So that's also information you could maybe use to tell apart different classes of snakes, right? So I think, so it stops being purely an image problem. It starts becoming a mixed deep learning problem, if you want, which is, again, super interesting. What else can I tell you? Yes. Okay, so maybe an important point is that, so I would say that explains why many participants did not make it to like the top of the ranking. And I think that's some food for thought that you might want to consider. I think the next point is why many people did not even manage to submit, right? And the explanation of that is, I mean, you will see several reasons, but one of them is like you need to be really good with the infrastructure. You don't need to own a supercomputer, or you don't need to own like lots of space to store images, but you certainly need to somehow sort that out. And this somehow can be like the cloud, right? And I know that you might be having some Google Cloud learning sessions, or some AWS learning sessions, or Alibaba Cloud, or Azure. It doesn't matter, right? But I think that kind of auxiliary skill, which is not strictly, if you want, data science, it's super important, because in this competition you had on the training set 500,000 pictures, right? And those were, and only the validation set was like super huge. So it wouldn't fit on your disk drive. Like my computer, for instance, has like 256 gigs of space. I believe the training set of the competition wouldn't even fit in there, right? So you need to sort it out and see how am I going to training that. And in my case, for instance, I use AWS Sagemaker, great way to get set up quickly. Many other solutions available in there, right? But that's an auxiliary skill that you also have to learn and master. Yeah, so let's add it a bit more. So I talk about AIcrowd, and I think I see a shift towards this direction in Kaggle competitions, in the sense that they are incorporating notebook-based competitions, and they are restricting, I believe, in a good sense, the freedom of participants by forcing everyone to go to a more structured pipeline and making sure that, I would say, I believe people should not cheat in competitions. I consider it very unethical, but I think that's something that as an organizer you have to foresee, and these are ways to prevent it, which I think it's great. So one of the things I like about the AIcrowd is that they do not want you as a participant to only submit like a flat file like a CSV file with your snakes and the probability of each class. And, you know, if you take one class, you sum up the probabilities, they add to 1, and that could be your submission, your CSV, for X images that you have in the testing set. What they want you to submit is the actual model and the requirements files. And you're going to put that into GitLab, which is one of these code hosting systems, maybe, you know, Bitbucket, maybe, you know, GitHub, kind of similar stuff, you know, but very nice. That will trigger a CI/CD pipeline. We'll take that requirement.txt or whatever you add that. We'll build it in a Docker container. We'll run your model. We'll generate those predictions, and then those predictions, that flat file that gets generated inside that Docker container, will get evaluated. And you will be tagging that submission, so that's how they know it's yours. And I think that's great because also from the organizer point of view, you can set constraints on, for instance, the running time, how long you allow your submissions to be evaluated. And that's a way of preventing, for instance, big bags of models or like stacking, right? Or I mean, you can still to some extent allow it, but it's a way of imposing, you know, I want to build in the future, let's say, an app that's going to evaluate snakes and give to the user an answer. And I don't want to be waiting for ages, nor do I want to spend lots of money in super powerful hardware. But that makes your job as a participant one level more difficult because it's not a flat file. The model actually needs to work on their side. But also, I think as an organizer, you're getting by the end of the competition, not only the winner's submission, but basically like as many working models as all of those participants who managed to submit, right? And you can cherry pick the best ideas of each of those participants. And even if, which has happened in other competitions, that you discover someone has cheated from the top, you can still take the second best, and it's not a pointless investment of time and effort from both sides. So basically that's, for instance, I just wanted to show you this GitLab repo, right? And this was truly your submission, not only the flat file. Okay, so I think that was it from the presentation itself. And I want to now talk a bit about myself and how I started my career in data science, and a few kind of like a few bits of advice or things that maybe I could change if I were to start all over, or like great resources that I think you could also use, right? So to be like super specific about me, you could obviously look me on LinkedIn, and then you will see that I work as a data scientist for a big pharma company, for Roche, and that I'm based in Basel, Switzerland, right? But the thing is, I don't come from Switzerland. I come actually from Barcelona, and I moved to first the US and then Switzerland for my studies, right? And then I start working in Basel. So sometimes friends and colleagues and strangers in LinkedIn like contact me and ask me about like job opportunities at my company or like pharma companies in general. And I think if you want to get started at a pharma company, because maybe it's, or working in Switzerland in general, what I feel is like usually people get hired that have lots of years of work experience in a domain, right? So getting junior level or entry level jobs, it might be quite hard. Then if you're on the, so to say, the first packet and you already have years of experience, then you won't experience any problems, go ahead with it. If you say, well, I mean, I was working as a software developer, I'm now learning some data science, but I don't really have like a formal education or background, though I want to get into this field, then consider things like graduate programs or even internships. Because in Switzerland, for instance, they are truly appreciated, right? So in my company, for instance, I got in with what they call like a Start IT graduate program, right? So, but they also have like other graduate programs, and I think those are fantastic opportunities for more like junior profiles. And when some people contact me on LinkedIn, I always send them to this graduate page. What else? I also told you it was very important to me to basically sharp out, or let's say my work computer is a Windows, but the computer I spend most of the time actually has like a Linux kernel. and my private computer is also like a flavor of Linux. And that's something that you truly feel, right? That transition from like a Windows operating system to like any flavor of like a Unix-like system. And I think it's super important to sharp out those skills if you want to work in data science, and if you want to work with any cloud provider, right? And I think those are the also two big things that I think you need to work on. For instance, not being scared of dealing with the command line of Ubuntu, CentOS, Fedora, RHEL, whatever, or even like a Mac, like whatever Unix-like system you have. Or if you don't have it, get started with it because you're going to need it. And then get started with the cloud. There are many great cloud providers, and probably the differences only make sense when you get to a certain kind of level of skill set, right? So probably like don't think too much about the decision. It's maybe even irrelevant at the beginning. I did like I had basically no idea about cloud. I didn't even know what it was. I would say 1.5 years ago, and then I started training myself and like doing some courses. And I think a few weeks ago, I got kind of like architect associate, right? So I think it has been for me a learning journey. And I did a video about how I did it, how I certified in like super short time and without also investing much resources. And I think that's something that if I had to start over again, I would do from the very beginning. Then maybe I also drive a meetup in Barcelona called Barcelona Coding Monkeys. If you ever want to hang out with us, you're completely invited. Due to Corona, we are going online now. So, last session was about learning Google Cloud, right? So if you want to join, please do. We also have events on like other technology stacks. So it's definitely not the only topic. It would be fun. And what else? I think I had the list. So I hope I motivated you to take part at least once or to try it out, a data science competition. And AIcrowd is hosting very soon the mask detection challenge. And this is kind of like a just for education competition, right? And I think in the context of what we are living now, it might be a very fun and interesting competition to take part on, right? So just like check it out. And yeah, I think that's basically it. Hope you enjoy the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Gloria. That was really, really useful. Some of the key takeaways on my part were the links to Fast AI and AIcrowd in general, just for finding these competitions and getting stuck in and meeting new people. Exactly how you said, it's quite hard to do that now in times of coronavirus. So getting involved with the competitions is definitely something that I've been doing more of. And yeah, it's really interesting to see that the way that organizers are restricting submissions, but it enables you to be more creative and actually get more usable results at the end of the competition. So for stuff like AI for social good competitions, that's really exciting to hear that the space is moving towards that. So I think we have a few questions. If you want to open the Q&A tab, it's just at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You'll be able to see some of them in there.
Okay, Alex says 44 giga is considered large. I mean, okay, maybe not that large for you, right? I think it's always what is large, what is small. I think it's a trouble for someone who pretends to do training locally, right? Definitely when you start working on AWS, not a problem, because then you can just pay for like a bigger EBS volume, right? Or a biggest S3 bucket. So I think for a beginner who has never worked on the cloud and has a computer like mine with 256 gigs, and half of them are already full, if not more, then it's a large data set. Okay, second one, Ben says, how did you deal having both a convolutional model for the image and a tabular model for the location-based data? Did you compare performance of the combined model with each of these standalone models? Yes, and I think that was very interesting. So for some snakes, you would only find them in one place. So you would not see a difference in performance when combining the two of them, right? But for some snakes that, if you remember, I had one slide that I was showing you the diversity in the looks of that snakes. And I said, those are the same snake in different geographic regions. And sometimes, honestly, the difference is not that big, but you would still find the same snake in different countries. Then that definitely adds a lot of extra information and helps you sort out between the different classes. So then you totally fill it. And I think that's also a nice thing that was only added in the last round of the competition. Before, the participants would only get image data. So it was a very nice point. And after the competition, I engaged with the organizer and said, it would be even greater if we had latitude and longitude, right? Because even like a country like US is super big. Of course, it gives you some information, but it could give you much more information. Okay, then we have, what's the difference when you get AWS certifications from Amazon or from Udacity? Okay, let me make sure I understand the question. So, like the certification itself will always be from one of these cloud providers, right? So I have seen Google certifications, Google Cloud certifications, Azure certifications, AWS certifications, so the cloud of Amazon. Then the question is, how do you prepare for those? And where do you get these training materials from, right? And I think there are many options. And if you go to that video I linked, I put on the slide, you will see me like discussing that for like longer. But basically, in a nutshell, is you will see that AWS on the website has some free training materials and some pathways, and then they also offer some paid materials. Then, to be honest, I have not worked with those, so I cannot really tell you, yes, they are very good, or yes, they are very bad. What I can tell you is the paid ones seem to me a bit expensive when compared to others. And the ones that have worked really well for me is AIcrowd. They offer great courses from AWS and Google Cloud, I think even Oracle Cloud, and then also AIcrowd Guru. So AIcrowd Guru, even this month, they fusioned with Linux Academy. So it's not only videos that help you get the certification, but you actually get some hands-on practice on this simulated environment, something like Quick Labs from GCP, if you know what that is. So, and then I also bought a Udemy course, but I didn't like it that much, right? And then Udacity, I have seen in Udacity some great nano degree programs. I think probably they also help to get a job. But personally, I know that, what I can tell you is my team, we are hiring for like a data engineer, and we are kind of like in the final phase. And we published the offer, and we got like 150 applicants, right? And each of us had to screen the CVs. So because these AWS or Google Cloud or Azure certifications are kind of like recognized within the industry, that was one of the keywords I was looking for, right? So I will never think that someone who has studied, and I would say it's one proxy more, right? Like having been going to university that's top in a ranking, having won like important competitions, having some of these certifications, it does not equal to that's going to be a great computer scientist or a great employee, but it's a proxy that maybe will invite you to a job interview and then secure you the job if you prove that that's actually the truth, right? Yeah. So from where can we get a link to participate in the mass detecting challenges? Oh, that's a good point. So you will have to go to the Crowd AI website, and then you just like look at the competitions. But I think what we can do is, if Christine is going to share that recording afterwards, I can send it to her and she can put it in there, right? I think it's, honestly, if you want to do it, it's really good because they will force you to go through this CI/CD pipeline, and that makes it way more difficult, but it's way more learning. Okay, and last question I see is, how do you see the path to become a data scientist from some interdisciplinary backgrounds? Is there any certificates or internships worth to take? Okay, so honestly, most of I would say there are, as of today, very few people that have like a bachelor or like completely formal education in data science, right? Because it's so new. So my colleagues and I myself, we are all like engineers, or I'm an engineer. Then we have some mathematicians, some physicists, right? So none of us had like strictly a data science bachelor or a data science master's. We do see some data science PhD because that came out kind of later, right? So I'm saying if you don't have this, don't let it stop you, because most professionals that are having these jobs now, they don't have it, right? And then I think, to be honest, interdisciplinarity can be a big advantage to you, because usually, while it might make it at the beginning a bit harder to learn the few concepts you need to be a data scientist working in industry, it probably means you're the main expert in another area, right? And then you need to look for the company or the research group that values that domain expert you have in that other area, right? Putting an example, as I was mentioning, we were interviewing for a data engineer, and it's great to have like a data engineer that knows all about Kubernetes and Docker. But I come with a pharma company with many years in the market, right? So that means we also have some IT infrastructure that, to put it nicely, it's not so new, right? And we need a person who is able to work with the latest technologies and know what's really going on, and knows how you would build, so to say, the IT infrastructure of your company if you were a startup starting today, but also that has worked with, let's say, super ancient with poor documentation, Oracle data warehousing systems, right? And can help you migrate from one to the other. So I would say, don't let up like this knowledge that you have in another area, like go to waste, like make the most of it, and that will get you like way further. I think I finished the questions, Christina.
I have a few more questions. I'm not able to use the Q&A, but I have 4 questions for you. I don't know, do we have time for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So I think one question that would be helpful to the viewers as well is like, how was the funnel going from like the 150 applicants for the data science role? Was there only 10 selected for interview and then only 5 for later stages and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot tell you how companies do it in general, right? I can tell you how my team, we did it. We used like a practice called, like formally in human resources, called embossing. And that means it's not the line manager reviewing all those CVs, it's actually the team who also chooses actively the new member coming. And I really like it. I think it was a super nice idea. So then within each of the team, we split those 150 CVs, right? So each of us would get a list of those CVs, a subset. And then we said, we are going to rank those CVs in 1 to 3. Being, one of these numbers, this CV should not be further looked at. Because what we see sometimes in data engineer positions is that you might have people that have actually more like data scientist profiles, and that's not what we were looking for, right? So I'm just saying or maybe you're looking for someone more senior and you get more junior applications, or the other way around. Because I think hiring someone senior for a junior position is also not ideal, in the sense that that person will feel they are not being utilizing their full potential, and can be very frustrating for both sides, right? So sometimes like make sure, I would say, whenever you see a job offer, that you are really, I myself don't have a single version of my CV. I have a generic template of my CV, which is very long. It's not a one-pager. It has, I don't know, 3 pages. And I just like I just keep in there the things I consider more relevant that I have done. And then whenever I applied to a job, I chose from those experiences the one that I thought, oh, those really match the job offer, right? Because you have to think you will have something like me and my colleagues getting many CVs and not that much time and looking at them fast, right? And what you look then is at things that strike your attention, which can be like, the degree, the university, a research project, it's like a job, some certifications. And those are the candidates that then went to the second round, which was approximately already, I think like we had 25. So it was already the big funnel. And those ones, we asked them to do a case study. So like, not live, but we gave them a task, and we then had like an interview following up on this case study. And from that, I think we only left the half of it. So you see the big funnel was at the beginning, then it's already 25, and maybe you already then have 10 or so. And those are ones we are having another technical interview round this week, actually. But maybe a point I missed is they only did not have like a case study, or I also, when I applied as a data scientist, I had this case study. We also had some more like soft skills questions, right? Because we want to kind of get to know, make sure we are passing into the team. So yeah.
Cool, thanks. That was very in-depth. That was useful. And another question is, when you had the snake graph, the different snakes, and the number of images for different species, how did you like solve that data set bias?
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting to hear how I wouldn't say solve, but I approach it, right? And also how other participants did, because so in our case, what we did is I would say I learned in these data science competitions, because the pipeline is complex, don't wait to submit until you have trained what you consider to be the perfect model. It's much better if you have like an iterative approach, which is it makes a lot of sense, and it's like a more and more common practice in software development, like overall. But in data science, it's again yet the same thing, right? So I would say we had the first submission, a crappy one. We make sure the whole thing worked. It was even a random submission, I would say, right? And then we realized which snake species were giving us the more trouble, right? And can we, for instance, go on the internet and gather extra images for those? Do we have to maybe undersample a bit, like the most dominant ones, to make sure they are not messing up with the existing ones, or duplicating some of these minority images? There was a lot of data augmentation. Sorry, I didn't mention that, and maybe that's the first thing I should have mentioned. There was lots of data augmentation. So mirroring the images, rotating the images, cropping the images. Then I also detailedly explored which classes were getting most confused. So maybe sometimes it was not about getting less of the 3 top most represented species, but making sure that those two were not getting confused, right? And then detecting big data quality issues in your image. So when the organizer gathered this data set, you can totally feel there are kind of 2 big groups of images. The ones that look out of like National Geographic kind of thing, like pretty snakes, amazing shots. And then the other ones I show you, which kind of, yeah, somebody decided that was a valid picture of a snake. And maybe you want to clean your data set, because maybe having less is more in some context. Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted. I also, as an extension to that question, how did you do the data augmentation? Was it specific to each snake image, or was it just programmatic for every image you cropped, rotated, and other operations?
To be honest, I did the same for all images, though I tried different augmentations, right? Because some worked better than others, as also like the resolution of the image was like an issue. How much can you downsample and still keep having good results? But what one of my colleagues tried, and I'm telling you what he did, because I think that's a very clever idea, is he had a pipeline, and he was doing first image detection and finding the snake in the picture. And then he was doing the augmentation, or then he was doing the augmentation, and of course the actual classification, right? And I thought, wow, that's definitely a very smart idea and solves some of the issues in which the snake, maybe you remember the picture of the car and the snake was kind of like small and in a corner. If you do a center crop or any kind of crop, maybe you're losing the snake. So that's probably a very good idea, but it requires some extra work, right? So another thing I learned is like, if you intend on taking part in a competition, don't start as we did, kind of like 2 weeks before or like a few days before it closes, right? Even though it gives you this extra rush, but don't do it.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that rush when the deadline is coming. But my final question is, you said you use Sagemaker. Did you use Sagemaker Studio, or did you just have like a Sagemaker notebook?
No, I actually use like Sagemaker Studio, but I think one of the cool things of Sagemaker is that you can do these like spin those training jobs, right? But which I actually didn't do. I was doing my training on the notebook, on like the same notebook I was working, right? To be honest, let me justify that choice. I started working with Google Colab. I pay for like the premium version of Colab, right? And I thought, yeah, that's going to be great. I'm going to put my images in there and I'm going to train the model. And it was not enough. I realized I needed like more than one GPU. Otherwise, I was going nowhere. Like each EPUB was taking like 1 hour and a half. I needed more compute power. And then Colab, if you ever work with a problem, with a problem that has, it doesn't matter if they are big, but the problem is usually if they have many small images, like which was the case, you will see that there is some issues with the I/O reading rate, and your images don't upload to Colab. So I was kind of having less images, and at the same time, it was taking ages to train. And then I was like, oh, we need option B. And that's how I kind of moved the whole project in the middle to AWS. And because I did not want to start like installing 1,000 libraries, I went to SageMaker because I knew they had this nice code environment with PyTorch, and I could just get my libraries on top of that.
Cool. Thanks for answering all my questions. But yeah, those are all my questions.
Thanks, Gloria, and thanks, Ben, for following up with some really interesting questions. Just as a shout out, a few of the links that have been mentioned by Gloria and myself have been shared in the comments. Don't worry, we'll follow up with an email containing all of those as well. So for those of you who are still here, thank you. And just a takeaway, please kind of take a look at our ML Ops Summit that we're hosting this Friday. If you're based in Central European time or in British summer time, this will start around midday for you and end at around 3 to 4 in the afternoon. And then if you're based in the North America region, we will be starting at 10 a.m. for you and ending around 4 p.m. for you. Other than that, that's all the announcements I have. And if anyone else has anything to share, Gloria and yourself, Ben, feel free, but that's the end of it. So thank you very much for attending.
Thanks a lot, Christina, for inviting us.
Can you hear my mic right now? Can you hear the fan going in the background? You're muted. Oh.
I cannot hear the fan. I just hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think the object detection prior to doing the snake identification is like a common thing in the computer vision. Like they also do it for the pose estimation as well. Like they first use like YOLO to find the human, and then they do like another neural network to turn it into the joint coordinates. So like first they have to like detect the bounding box around the human. So I think he took inspiration from some of the other interesting applications.
Yeah, I think to me it was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And actually, I mean, this guy was kind of like the one who came second, very close with the first one. And when we talk, all of us, I think it struck me the amount of time they spent inspecting the data set. Yeah.
That's a good tip. Inspect the data set. Oh, when you said a lot of time, how much time do you mean?
I mean, I cannot really tell, right? Because to be honest, I didn't consider participating in this competition until like the very end, that I thought, oh, that's very curious. Oh, and it's a very nice cause. And as I told you, I was like just 2 weeks before it closed, right? So, but these guys, but some of the teams had been already like doing many submissions before. And what mentioned is that they realized that what I said about having sometimes less data is actually more. They had done like a lot of self-cleaning of the data set, and a lot even of manual gathering, I would say, of extra data, which is always, I mean, it was not banned by the organizers, but it's also it's a bit tricky, because maybe then, of course, some of these extra images that you have been scrapping from, like, let's say, naturalism sites, then they happen to be in the test set. So the whole point of having a test set from the organizer sites gets a bit like jeopardized. Even they were not like trying to cheat, right? They were just like trying to improve the algorithm, and gathering more data is one of those easiest, or it's one of those strategies. So yeah, but I think also it was very cooperative. So some of the images were corrupt, and I spotted some of those. I published the list. Then some other folks had added instances to that list. So I learned this word co-opetition, which is like when you compete and at the same time cooperate. And I feel that was totally the case in that competition, that people, and actually many of these hackathons or competitions, I feel that, yes, people do want to win, but not at any cost or not in any way, right?
Cool, thanks.